Judicialwatch.org is Tom Fitton's website. Tom Fitton is with me. He's the president. Tom, you get the microphone. You get the you have the con. Where are you going to take us?
Well, it's great that the president has been vindicated. There's no collusion. So we had over nearly 200 pages of irrelevancies about Russia collusion, but I couldn't disguise the fact that all of those alleged contacts between the Russians and the Trump campaign amounted to nothing legally or substantively. So there's no collusion. And then you had this grave abuse of power by Mueller, suggesting obstruction where no obstruction took place. Attorney General Barr wasn't fooled and concluded there was no obstruction of justice, despite Mr. Mueller's implications otherwise. So in many ways, it was the final act of abuse of power by the Mueller operation. And this is why the Attorney General Barr, was under such attack by the Democrats, because he saw through this 448-page smear job and got to the heart of both sections, no collusion and no obstruction.
Yeah, and that's what it is. And there is no evidence that the president committed a crime. A key thing to note, there's no evidence that any American colluded with the Russians. So not only did the president not do it, but yet you still saw throughout the day the goalposts being moved. First of all, to start the day, it was obstruction. And then later on in the day, this was a impeachment roadmap. This is some sort of a coded. This is like what we need to get the what's the expression? The code talkers. What is we need to have, I guess. We need to get those seer stones that interpreted the Book of Mormon. We need to get the Rosetta Stone. I mean, what do we need to do here? We need to get we need to be able to decipher this document as a impeachment roadmap if we have that ability, Tom. And then by the end of the day, Deep State Clapper, as we refer to him at Breitbart News, who's still using his security clearance to get a paycheck from CNN, referred to passive collusion, inventing a new expression to round out the insane media day yesterday. And it just reeks of desperation to me.
Well, this is, and I rarely use the term lie, but you have senior former government officials, senior elected representatives, knowingly lying about this collusion. There was no collusion. The Russians and the Trump campaign were not colluding or conspiring in either any informal or illegal ways. You can read it for yourselves in the Mueller report. He describes dozens of contacts or dozens of, he takes two or three people and discusses at great length their, as I said, unsubstantial, immaterial, and most of the time appropriate and legal communications with people who may or may not be connected to the Russian government. So there's no there there, and they always knew there was no there there. In fact, that's the language for one of the text messages. There's no there there. And yet, this Mueller operation continued to spin despite them knowing there was no collusion at least a year ago, hoping to get the president on a fraud obstruction charge. Now, why is it fraud, Alex? Because he's being accused of acting as president, meaning considering hiring and firing people, and they're changing that into, well, that could be possibly obstruction. So that would be such a So every hiring decision by the president now, according to the Mueller craziness, would be subject to criminal investigation, because even though he's exercising his constitutional powers we give him as president, we're going to take that presumably constitutional exercise of power and attach a potential criminal investigation to it. Unbelievable. This Mueller operation, when they talk about the president wanting to shut it down, the president should have shut it down. And I wish the people around him hadn't, quote, tried to protect him, which is just baloney, and done what he wanted to do, which was to shut it all down because it was an abuse of power by the Justice Department.
Sure, and of course now we know he would have been vindicated, but the thing is the media would have immediately convicted him of being political. And does that even matter anymore? That's the question. And it would certainly have mattered less today. The way I described it, Tom, was this Mueller report was the media's Jonestown. It was their epic mass suicide. If they had any credibility left, I think that is it is no more. There needs to be a full reset in our establishment media if they ever want to get their credibility back. It's just gone for half of the country. We'll never see them as legitimate again. But your summation there is very good, and it begs a couple of crucial questions here. And I should note that we've treaded a lot of ground on this story today and over the past couple of years. But I, by and large, made a decision for Breitbart, Tom, that I talked about on Bill Maher's show over almost 2 years ago, talking about how we're going to cover the president's agenda. We're not going to focus as much on this stuff because we know that it doesn't look like there's any collusion, and we're not going to take the bait and distract the public from what the president wants to do. We're going to cover the ups and the occasional downs, particularly the immigration aspect of it, of the president's agenda. Folks like you did a great job trying to push back against an overwhelming establishment press, and you deserve a big credit, which is why people should go to judicialwatch.org. You guys know I'm big boosters of them. But Tom, your summation begs two questions. First of all, when so much leaked out of the Mueller report, when do you think they knew there was no collusion for sure? And why, of all the things, why did that not leak out? And why did this continue? I mean, if he was leaking things or people on his staff were leaking things so consistently, and they had to have gotten the gist that there's not going to be collusion, I would guess at least 2 years ago. I'm sorry, at least 1 year ago, maybe as much as 18 months ago. They had to have gotten the impression there's no collusion. And yet it went on and on and on. And no one really officially came out and said, yeah, this is not going to be collusion.
Oh, they knew almost immediately upon the appointment. Well, I'm convinced it will be shown they knew from the get-go there was no collusion. Remember those text messages at the beginning of the Mueller appointment where Page and Strzok are talking to each other, worried there's no there, but they're hopeful for impeachment. And then you had Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein, and I forget the date, but it's well over a year ago, in announcing these indictments that Mueller had issued against these Russians for the various activities, the Facebook posts and the hacking, said that no Americans were knowingly involved with the effort to impact our election. So that was announced a year ago. So they've known that for at least a year plus. That's the most charitable interpretation. But they allowed this investigation to continue to fester, to harass the president. And, I know boosters of the president think he did a great job over the last 2 years, right? Well, imagine if he was able to do his job completely without this harassment and interference with his ability to govern.